Thank you for joining us for another episode of Marking the Times. This is Dr. Mark Hitchcock here in Edmond, Oklahoma, in my office here at Faith Bible Church. And it's just a great privilege to come to you every week and talk to you about things that are happening in our world today related to end-time Bible prophecy, or really other questions you have you can send in. They don't have to be about prophecy. Send those into our Facebook page, and we'd love to answer questions you have. The last couple of weeks I've answered some questions, but I want to talk about something today that I know you've heard about in the news. This rise in anti-Semitism that's taking place. There's kind of a sudden mushrooming of this in our world today. It's kind of been brought to a head because of Representative Ilhan Omar, who's a congresswoman here in the United States, also Representative Rashida Tlaib. They've both been making anti-Semitic statements, and because of the ones that Representative Omar made, there's been a resolution that was introduced in Congress originally to condemn anti-Semitism, but as often happens in Washington, all kinds of other things get mixed in. So it just kind of became a resolution condemning acts of hate and intolerance, including anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim activities. So anyway, that was voted on, and it passed 407 to 23. But these are just a couple of instances of what we see of a rise of anti-Semitism in our world today. 74%, there's been a 74% rise in France of offenses against Jewish people in the last year. There's been a 60% rise of offenses against Jewish people in the country of Germany. And of course, a lot of that, I think, probably is the mass wave of immigration of followers of Islam who've come into Europe are perpetrating these acts of violence against the Jewish people. But across Europe, anti-Semitism is on the rise. In fact, 90% of the people in Europe believe that anti-Semitism is rising in Europe. So we see this happening everywhere. And I want to clarify a few terms, though, that I think are important. There's the term Zionism. You may have heard that. Then there's anti-Zionism. Then there's anti-Semitism. So let me just define those quickly. Zionism, at least my understanding of the term, the way I would define it, is Zionists believe that the Jewish people, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, have a right to their ancient homeland that was given to them by God. That's what it means to be a Zionist. You believe the Jewish people have a right to their homeland. Those who are anti-Zionist believe the Jewish people don't have a right to that homeland. Those are the people that want to push them out of the land, that have been trying to do that ever since 1948. Then, of course, anti-Semitism is a hatred or an intolerance and proposing violence against the Jewish people. But there's something today called the new anti-Semitism. And I think it's important to define this because many people today who are anti-Semitic, they cloak their anti-Semitism with this idea of just being against Israel, being anti-Zionist, not believing the Jewish people have a right to their homeland. And so they're actually anti-Semitic, but they're trying to not act like they really hate the Jewish people. It's that they hate the Jewish state and hate the Jewish government and want the Jewish people driven out of their homeland. Now, that's been called by many, and I think rightly so, the new anti-Semitism. Because it's still anti-Semitism. It's wanting to drive the Jewish people out of their land, but they cloak it with this idea again of, well, we're not against the Jewish people, we're just against their government. Behind all of this, though, is a satanic conspiracy. All the way back in the Garden of Eden, God said that one would come forth from the seed of the woman who would crush the head of the serpent. And the head crusher is coming. And of course, we know that was fulfilled ultimately in the Lord Jesus, where he won the victory at the cross. But in Genesis 12 and following, we find out that this one who would crush the serpent's head was going to be a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So from that point on, the Jewish people had a large bullseye on them. And that Satan tried to wipe them out with Pharaoh, with Haman in the book of Esther, with Antiochus Epiphanes, with Hitler in the 1930s. And there's never been an age-long hatred like this of any other race or group of people as there is with the Jewish people. And because it's being energized throughout time by Satan. And so Satan tried to keep the Messiah from coming and from accomplishing his work. He was failed in that. But now what he's going to try to do is to wipe out the Jewish people so that the Messiah can't come back and reign over them and fulfill the covenants that God made with them. So he's trying to thwart God's program. And I think what we see today with all this anti-Semitism is a setup for the future. The Antichrist, the final world ruler, is going to be the greatest anti-Semite in human history. I mean, he's going to wear out the saints of the Most High, the Bible tells us in Daniel chapter 7. We also see this anti-Semitism, I think, paving the way for the rise of Antichrist, because after the rapture of the church, the event that starts the 7-year tribulation period is the Antichrist making a covenant or a treaty for 7 years with Israel. And it seems like it's some kind of peace compact or peace treaty, because the Jewish people then are going to be allowed to offer sacrifices in their new temple that's been rebuilt. So we see the paving of the way for all this, because Antichrist is going to come forward and kind of be the man with a plan. And he's going to make this treaty. Now, he's going to break it at the midpoint and become the worst enemy the Jewish people have ever had. So we see the world kind of ripe for this person to come along who looks like they're going to solve that problem, only to break the treaty and then unleash a reign of horror, really, for the Jewish people in the last half of the tribulation period. So hopefully this will help you put some of the things that are happening in our world into context, and see how what we see happening today with this rise in anti-Semitism is really paving the way for exactly what the Bible predicts in the end times. And one other thing that I think is fascinating is just the fact that there are Jews today living in their own homeland is a miracle. That's a fulfillment of prophecy. So the fact that there's a Jewish people that still exist for the world to be against is really a miracle of prophecy. It's the miracle on the Mediterranean that they've been brought back there to their nation. Anyway, I hope this is helpful as you kind of sort through some of these things you're hearing in the news. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us.